RealAgriculture.com presents Under the Microscope with BioVision Seed Labs.
All right, we are here with Holly Gelich, Business Development Manager with BioVision, and this is episode 2 of Under the Microscope. Welcome here, Holly.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I'm excited to talk about seed quality this week.
Yes. So let's get right down to it. We are, of course, on the tail end of harvest. Lots of samples have come in. I'm sure you're very busy. Any trends on the germination or disease side that you're seeing from the crops that have come in?
Oh, absolutely. We've been analyzing cereal crops and pulse crops now for a few weeks across Western Canada. And what I'll do is I'll focus in on each of the different crops that we test to give you perspective, because each one of them may have different things going on in the germination test.
Okay.
So the biggest crop that we deal with would be wheat, and that's very much coincides with the commodity acres as well. And the germination results that we've seen this year have ranged from 60% on the low end all the way up to 100%. So It's an extremely wide range, but the average is close to that 95 percentile mark. So overall, the quality of the wheat crop has been relatively good. Mm-hmm. When we move to barley, same thing. We've seen a few samples that have had low germinations, but overall, the barley crop is fantastic this year from a seed perspective, not necessarily from a malt perspective in regards to some protein levels. But in regards to germination, the malt crop is fantastic. There was very little weathering on the crop, so that resulted in very little staining or any adverse conditions on the germination standpoint. So oats, we've only tested a few crop samples, and that's really a function of it is one of the last crops to come off. Mm-hmm. But the samples we have tested have been really good. There is very little frost out in the field, so that is fantastic. We've seen really good germinations on the oat samples. Now, the pulses have been somewhat of a different story. What we've seen is a lower average germination in the 80 percentile range. Okay. And there's a couple things our analysts are seeing. One of them is they are seeing what is classified as mechanical damage, which is really the thought process that it was harvested on a dry side. Mm-hmm. And then during the process of harvest and movement of that grain, it got damaged. Now, some of the damage can be seen physically in the form of splits and cracks, but quite often in pulse crops as well as soybean crops, you can't see with the naked eye some of the seed coat cracking, which can affect the germination. Now, what we are also seeing in some of the pulse crops is some chemical damage. And when I say chemical damage, that's really a function of a pre-harvest glyphosate application, maybe a little early in the crop. And what we're seeing from a seedling standpoint is at the end of a germination test on the pulses, the peas the shoot itself will be about 4 inches long on a normal seedling. And the same for the root extending down from the seed. But on pulses that have been sprayed and are affected by the glyphosate, they tend to only be about an inch long, both in the shoot and the root, so they're very stubby. And they don't have really proper root hairs developing as well. So we are seeing that from a pulse perspective. Since we're talking about peas, let's also talk about soybeans. Yes. We have started testing soybeans from a germination standpoint. We have a lot in test right now. So the data I do have right now is that the germs seem to be in that low 90s and high 80s. And we are seeing what we think is some mechanical damage, which is some cracks, because the crop was quite dry.
Yes, yeah, and that's certainly in Manitoba, harvest conditions have been lovely in that we didn't get a lot of rain or weathering or that sort of stuff, but I mean, very, very dry. So not really a surprise to hear that there's increased mechanical damage and some germ impacted because of that. What about disease levels? How have those been?
Disease levels have been extremely high this year, and it's higher than we've seen in a lot of years. And it's not necessarily a surprise. We saw a lot of leaf disease in crop in late July, early August. So it's something I think in the back of producers' minds is that it was going to be there. So, from a perspective of pulses, we're seeing very high ascochyta levels. Okay. We've seen them in the 20% range on the high side. and then down to that couple percent on the low side. So that's something that is definitely of concern from a pulse perspective.
Mm-hmm.
From a cereal perspective, what we are seeing is a lot more Fusarium graminearum this year, and that is really across Western Canada. And the producer needs to think back that, yeah, we had great harvest conditions and it was dry, but this disease infects the plant at flowering stage, which tends to be at the beginning of July, depending on seeding dates and the growth of the crop. And at that time of the year, it was hot, and it was humid, we were getting constant rain, and we had a fantastic crop coming. There was a lot of heavy canopies out there.
Yeah.
So in order for the disease to really manifest itself, you need the weather conditions we had the hosts, and then we had the inoculant in the field as well.
Yeah.
So, the data we're seeing from Alberta is quite high for Fusarium graminearum in comparison to prior years.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen roughly 30% of our samples that we have tested in Alberta detect some level of Fusarium graminearum. Okay. Now, keep in mind it's early in the season, and we tend to get samples from the south, which is more of a traditional infection area, early. But to benchmark it against last year at this time we were at about 20% of the samples were detecting it. So it's a higher amount out there.
Yeah. Which, I mean, as you said, conditions have definitely, this past year, were definitely conducive to disease development. So it's not entirely surprising, but still worrisome. Now, to wrap this into decisions to make about your crop when you get some of these samples back. Now, we talked about mechanical damage that you can't really see, let's say on pulses and soybeans. Is that, a high level of that damage, the cracks and the things that we can't see, is that going to eat away at germination over the winter if it's being stored, if it takes on water, something like that? I mean, is that a factor that's going to decrease the quality of that crop for seed in the spring?
Oh, absolutely. Safe storage of all seed is so important through the time right from harvest until it is seeded. Mm-hmm. One thing, especially when you have cracks, you have an opportunity for even in storage fungus to infect the kernel. Yeah. So that would be types of penicilliums, aspergillus that can infect the pulse and then affect the germination later. So definitely safe storage conditions are very important going forward.
Mm-hmm. And with that, then obviously, so take care to store properly, but also with that same lot, if you had earmarked it for seed, would you recommend another seed test before seeding to see where your germ levels have moved over the winter?
Absolutely, I would highly recommend it. Doing it in that March time period, February to March, is a fantastic opportunity. Takes a while for the test to actually process, so by doing it then, if it has dropped significantly, it's not a scramble in May to try to find another seed source.
Great. Okay, thanks so much, Holly. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Lindsay.